Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code SHAKE for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code SHAKE.
You already know Dad doesn't actually want another tire watch. So this Father's Day, gift him the tender, juicy taste of his favorite cut of steak from Omaha Steaks. Their high-quality steaks and proteins are perfect for summer grilling. Plus, you'll get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. Omaha Steaks is a family-owned company with over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. That means premium meats for premium dads. Every steak is flash frozen and vacuum sealed at the moment of peak freshness, so every bite is as delicious as the day it was carved. Try the fan favorite Butcher's Cut Filet Mignon that has earned the coveted distinction of USDA certified very tender. Give the dads in your life something to savor. Visit omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.
Hey, warm and friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going with another conference preview edition today, third in the last 7 days, so we're getting you set for the upcoming season. As I always do, we're going in alphabetical order with the low/mid majors, and then we save the big boys for the end. So today, the Big Sky gets its sparkle and shine. We're going to be looking at the betting trends and what we all saw from the Big Sky last year, and we'll throw in there a little bit with Utah Tech and Southern Utah as it's an expanded conference with the WAC sort of dissolving and having a little bit of conference realignment there. So we'll take a look at the betting trends and all the styles of play of the Big Sky here in segment number 1. In the second segment, Rob Donaldson, he does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He's over there at Underdog Fantasy. He's going to join me. We're going to look at all 12 of the rosters in this league, take a look at some of the coaching changes that we've seen, and so much more. And then in the final segment, I'm getting you my projector or finish for the Big Sky. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters ZM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way, that is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in those Twitter/X questions. Lets me know how to be able to get you best prepared for what I hope to be the best college basketball season ever, and makes the offseason go by a little bit faster. But how about if we do dive in and let's take a look at a Big Sky conference where second chances were very hard to come by. That's the one thing that I really note with this conference. You're not going to be able to get a lot of offensive rebounds. Now, there's some pretty good three-point shooting. I'll mention that in a second, but you take a look at some of the best defensive rebound teams in all of college basketball. A lot of them resided out there in the Big Sky. Idaho was your best. Teams were only able to grab 21.7% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound against them. That was 4th in the country. Mambo number 5, that was Northern Colorado. Teams only grabbed 21.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. You'll look a little bit further down the line. Portland State was really solid on this front. They were 20th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, you did have a few teams out there that were not so good, and those were the teams that, for the most part, they were just awful. Sacramento State, 295th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They got lambasted within the conference. Eastern Washington, they were able to have a little bit of a come up, 167th with regards to defensive rebound percentage. They were really brutal towards the beginning part of the season. As they improved towards back half of the season, that was solid. Now, Weber State is going to be under a new coaching regime, but they're still going to have a lot of size. They were 58th in the country last year in terms of defensive rebound percentage. The Montana schools, they were a little bit hot and cold for Montana State. They're about 104th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Montana, they were more around about 165th, but you weren't getting a lot of second and third chances against too many of these teams whatsoever. And then a team that was really getting lambasted in the conference, Northern Arizona, 321st with regards to defensive rebound percentage. Now, these teams give up a lot of opportunities from three. Northern Arizona, they were worst three-point shooting defense in the conference, 362nd in the country. Team shot 38.7% from three-point range against them. That is not great. And then you have your newcomer in Southern Utah. They were 358th in the country. At home, team shot 41.5% from three-point 3-point range against them, so they'll fit in quite well with a lot of these other teams. But the teams that they were able to guard the arc, a lot of them were able to give you some success. Portland State, 78th in the country. They shot 32.3%, their opponents did, from 3-point range, so that was relatively solid. Idaho is a team that struggles a little bit with their 3-point shooting defense. Made the NCAA tournament in spite of that. Team shot 35.2% from 3 against them. They were more country average away from them. They actually allowed it quite a bit at home, and this is one of those conferences that, even though it's a little bit more spread out, because you've got Oregon represented, Idaho, now you expanded to the great state of Utah with Utah Tech and Southern Utah, already had Weber State out there as well, the Colorado schools, so you've got some mountainous, shall we say, travel. It is a case where you've got some very strange home and road splits where a lot of teams just give it up at home. Now, Northern Colorado was a really good 3-point shooting defense. They allowed opponents to shoot 30.7% from 3 down to 29.2% away from home. That was a top 30 mark in all of college basketball. Once again, they were able to have some success within the conference last season. For Montana, they were a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but again, the teams that really struggled, they were the teams that gave it up. Idaho State, they were outside the top 215 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Eastern Washington, they buckled down towards the back half of the season. You look at the home and road splits, they allowed teams to shoot 30.2% from 3-point at home, 37.2% away from home. It's a big reason why they were above 500 when they were within the conference. Outside the conference, they were just absolutely line-based. They were 261st in the country, and then Sacramento State, 257th in the country with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. And name of the game for a lot of these teams is going to be turnovers. You had a lot of teams that they really were doomed by their turnovers. Montana, the biggest of them, 341st in the country in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis. That was an absolute killer for them. Sacramento State, they are another one of those teams that was very interesting because they actually took care of the ball. They had Mikey Williams, 28th in the country in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. When Williams left, that left them a little bit more, shall we say, lamb-based out there, so that really hurt their cause. Portland State is a team that was a little bit hot and cold, 193rd with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis, and Eastern Washington buckled down towards the back half of the season, but they were a team that was 250th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Southern Utah had a rough go of it last season out there in the WAC. They were 352nd, and you should see the Utah schools in terms of Utah Tech and Southern Utah be much better in terms of taking care of the ball. They were out there in a WAC conference where they had some of the most prolific teams in terms of generating turnovers in all of college basketball. And the question is going to be, who's going to be able to defend down low? Well, these teams don't allow a lot of second and third chances. You have a lot of teams that they allowed high percentages from 2-point range. Utah Tech, when they were out there in the WAC last season, 253rd in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Southern Utah actually respectable at 174th, but again, they got so badly blasted from 3 that didn't matter at that point. In terms of the returning schools, Northern Arizona, 331st in opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Idaho State, 328th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. These two teams were towards the bottom of the conference. Meanwhile, Portland State, one of your better teams within the conference, 66th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. The Montana schools were very much right in the middle, 183rd for Montana State, 186th for Montana, so they were able to have some solid seasons. Sacramento State was one of those teams that was towards the bottom of the conference, 340th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Eastern Washington, 333rd with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Again, much better when they were at home rather than away from home. And your team that represented in the NCAA tournament, Idaho, 69th. Very nice in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So being able to guard down low, being able to guard those first shots, because a lot of teams get second shots, that was very, very critical. And if you just look at the tempos in this conference as well, you're going to find a nice array of tempos. You don't necessarily have a lot of teams that play at a super-duper breakneck pace. Montana was able to gun it a little bit more last year. They were 85th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Their counterpart within the state, Montana State, 257th in the country. There is an added team that loves to play fast in Southern Utah. Last year, in terms of total possessions per game, they were 69th in all of college basketball. Portland State is a team that plays with some urgency, 121st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Idaho was about 136th. Idaho State is a team that loves to play slow, 290th in terms of total possessions per game. Sacramento State, in year number 1 under Mike Bibby, they just couldn't find their bearings. They were 29th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Didn't do them a lot of good. Northern Colorado is a team that typically likes to gun at 71st in terms of total possessions per game. And Weber State, they were 91st last season. Keep in mind, they've got an NBA-style coaching regime that's going to be coming in. So you've got quite a few teams that they like to play fast, and then Northern Arizona, they look to play slowly last year, 341st in terms of total possessions per game. That did not work out very well for them, and This is a conference where you've got a lot of good three-point shooting, and that did help you out to the overs. I will get into that in a minute, because even Northern Arizona was absolutely lambasted in the conference. They were 79th in the country last year in terms of three-point shooting percentage at 35.6%. Montana, they shot 36.6%, 37th in the country. Montana State was 52nd. They shot 36.1% from the outside. Portland State, honestly, was not a good three-point shooting team, but they made up for it with their great defense. They were about 250th last season in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Sacramento State, they were one of the lesser teams in the country, and they shot 41.1% from three-point range at home, 26.4% away from home, 284th in all of college basketball, so that was rough. Utah Tech, last season out there in the WAC, they were a solid three-point shooting team. They were 113th in the country, and then you had Southern Utah, who they were neither here nor there, 231st in all of college basketball. Weber State was a team that last year, they were okay with their three-point shooting percentage, 143rd. We'll see where that is going to be going moving forward. And under Dan Montz at Eastern Washington is looking to be a team that really bombs from three. They were 62nd in the country, and in games specifically played away from home, they were top 50 in all of college basketball. And then you have a Northern Colorado team that's always really good on the inside. Away from home, they shot 36.1% for three, top 55 mark in all of college basketball. And with all this, it's very interesting to gauge with regards to a totals perspective, because with the Big Sky, you have a lot of teams that they love to play fast. You didn't necessarily have one like super duper over team. None of these teams were like in the top 10, top 15 in all of college basketball with regards to the over percentage, but you had way more over teams than under teams. As a matter of fact, you only had 4 teams that played fewer than 53% of their games to the under. Montana, 14 overs, 15 unders, and a push. Portland State, 12 overs and 16 unders. Idaho, 14 overs, 19 unders. Northern Arizona, 11 overs to 18 unders. Other than Northern Arizona, these were teams that were pretty solid with regards to guarding inside. Eastern Washington was your best over team, 19 overs to 13 unders. Idaho State, 17 overs, 13 unders. And then you had a pair of teams, Montana State, Northern Colorado, 16 overs to 13 unders. Sacramento State, 15 overs, 13 unders. Weber State, 16 overs, 14 unders. So, again, nothing overly demonstrative. And if you want to go out there to the WAC, to Utah Tech, along with Southern Utah, 17 overs, 12 unders. Utah Tech, 17 overs, 14 unders. So, these are teams that they're a little bit more urgent. There's quite a bit of offense to be had within this conference. And if you look at the conference games and the conference games only out there in the Big Sky last season, you did notice that the defense hunkered out a little bit more, because these are teams that they really looked at push your style in non-conference play. Again, you never really had any team that was super duper demonstrative. Your best under team within the conference, Northern Arizona, 8 overs to 11 unders. And then you had Montana within the conference, 9 overs to 12 unders. 9 overs to 11 unders for both Eastern Washington and Portland State. And your top over team was Idaho State, 12 overs to 8 unders. And then you had 11 overs to 8 unders with both Weber State and Sacramento State. So a little bit more of an over conference, but nothing where it was like totally jarring or anything like that. And then you take a look at the against the spread trends, because I mentioned it with the Big Sky. You have a lot of mountainous travel, what have you, and you had some really good against the spread teams. Portland State was one of your biggest money-making teams in all of college basketball. 18-9-1 against the spread. That was the top 10 mark in all of college basketball. Howard, Stephen F. Awesome, West Georgia, Detroit, Penn, Prairie View, Fresno State. Those were the only teams that were better than 66.7% against the spread last season. So they were in some rarefied air there. And then you had some other teams that provided value. Eastern Washington, they were much better in the second half of the season, 19-13 against the spread. Montana State was 16-12 against the spread. Northern Colorado, 15-13-1 against the spread. Like, your worst team against the spread was Sacramento State at 13-15 against the spread. That's not too bad for your worst team within the conference. Like, Idaho State was 14-16 against the spread. Northern Arizona 14-15 against the spread. Idaho 16-17 against the spread. So you had a lot of middling teams, but overall it was a conference that was a little bit dogged. You were able to make a little bit of money there, and with these teams, they're able to do a relatively solid job because they know what to expect with regards to travel. Now, yeah, Sacramento State really struggled with the travel, 5-11 against the spread away from home. The rest of the teams were not too bad against the spread away from home. Montana, Northern Arizona 6-8 against the spread away from home. Idaho 7-9 against the spread away from home. Idaho State 7-8 against the spread away from home, but Portland State 11-4 against the spread away from home. Eastern Washington 12-6 against the spread on the road. Northern Colorado 9-5 against the spread away from home. And this is a conference that has a lot of teams that they have to play quite a few bye games. They're going to have a lot of just inclement travel in general. And you saw these teams really step up outside the conference. There were only 3 teams within the Big Sky that were below 50% with their cover rate against the spread in non-conference play. Idaho was 5-6 against the spread in non-con play. Sacramento State was 4-5. Montana was 3-6. So it wasn't like you had a bunch of teams that bottomed out. I mean, Portland Portland State, they were 7-1 against the spread against non-conference opponents. Idaho State was 8-2. Northern Colorado, 7-3 against the spread against non-conference teams. Montana State, 6-3-1. Northern Arizona, 6-4, and they were awful last year. And Weber State, 6-5 against the spread in non-conference play. So these teams were very solid there, and these are a lot of teams that they do a nice job in terms of stepping up as a, shall we say, middle-of-the-road favorite. You don't want these teams as demonstrative favorites. You had quite a few teams struggle in the role of an underdog, but only 2 teams failed to cover at least 50% of their games as a favorite last year. Montana, 6-9, very nice against the spread as a favorite. Northern Colorado, 11-12 against the spread as a favorite. And then you had Idaho State at 7-7, but every one of these other teams hit at least 57% against the spread as a favorite. Idaho, 12-9 against the spread as a favorite. Montana State, 10-6-1 against the spread as a favorite. Portland State, 12-7-1 against the spread as a favorite. Northern Arizona didn't find themselves in the spot too much, but hey, 3-0 against the spread as a favorite. Weber State, 9-4 against the spread as a favorite. Eastern Washington, 7-4, and then Sacramento State, they were 2-1 against the spread as a favorite. And if you're looking at the WAC teams and what they were able to provide last season, Southern Utah, they were 1-0 against the spread as a favorite. Yay, verily, there in Utah Tech, they were able to rise up as the season went along. They were 7-4 against the spread as a favorite. And if you look at how these teams did away from home last season, it was a very interesting circumstance with those 2 teams that are going to be joining the conference fresh, because Southern Utah, they were break-even, 8-1 against the spread away from home. Utah Tech, they were 9-7 against the spread away from home. And overall, these 2 teams that are joining the conference, they were teams that were relatively middle of the road. Utah Tech, they really took off in WAC play, 19-12 against the spread overall for the season, so they were hitting at about 61%. Southern Utah, neither here nor there, 14-1 against the spread. So very interesting conference with some great betting trends. And coming up next, how about if we look at all 12 of these rosters, we take a look at the nooks and crannies of this conference, and so much more with Rob Donaldson, who does great work over at Underdog Fantasy, right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
When maintaining your daily wellness rituals is important to you, the change in routine during the summer can feel daunting. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just 1 packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and much more. So you'll be fueled and ready for wherever life or your summer adventures take you. No fillers, no nonsense. Just the good stuff your body craves. Plus, it actually tastes delicious. But you can try it for yourself, because the variety pack includes all 6 delicious fan favorites: chocolate, vanilla, chai, matcha, coconut acai, and strawberry. So instead of worrying about sticking to your daily ritual, simplify it with Kachava. Go to kachava.com and use code SHAKE for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code SHAKE.
Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at CBBAnalytics.com. That is CBBAnalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN, because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. We're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. This is a Big Sky Conference Preview Edition, so we head out to our guy, Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy. He does an amazing job looking at this great sport of college basketball all 12 months out of the year. This time of year, doing a great job on the baseball front as well. You're able to follow him on the old Twitter/X at RobDFB. And when it comes to in-season and college basketball, this man is a mid-major maestro, and always appreciate it. Rob, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. I love talking about the mid-majors, especially the ones that don't get necessarily kind of the pub of, say, the American or the Mountain West. You know, we're talking about the Big Sky today, and for those who watch the Big Sky tournament and have watched the Big Sky tournament year over year, it delivers every single year. There's a lot of really fun teams, a lot of teams that end up kind of putting on a performance in the NCAA tournament as well. And so I think shining a light on some of these programs is a really awesome thing to do.
Yep, no question about it. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we get here in the Big Sky this season, because we've got a few new teams in here, because the WAC that dissolved and some of the Utah teams decided, hey, you know what, we're going to join this conference. So how about if we start first things first with Southern Utah, a team that they were rough with their defense, to say the least, last season, well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They pretty much don't want you to take a lot of threes, and when teams took threes, well, they certainly gave them up. As for Southern Utah, they are allowing teams to shoot about 38% from three-point range. They don't add a lot here in the transfer portal. Want to get your thoughts here, because I like the addition of Judge Juan Nichols, but what they're going to get outside Judge Juan Nichols coming over from Tennessee Tech is a big, giant question mark.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think when you're talking about, the Southern Utah program that at one point in time, when we remember when Todd Simon was there, they were rolling. They were competitive every single year. They had a lot of talented players, and that was all pre-NIL, kind of pre-transfer portal, when it really kind of took hold of this sport. And so, like a lot of other teams that have kind of fallen in this little bit of a tier patch, like a Southern Utah, it can be difficult kind of building up a team, having continuity year over year. It almost basically doesn't exist. And so kind of what is the approach with a team like this that can't go out and spend like crazy, doesn't have the appeal of the next level, and really is just a team that, hey, here's your opportunity to play Division I basketball. I don't know. I think ultimately when you look at this type of team right now in the new look Big Sky, it's not one of the ones that I instantly gravitate towards. At the same time, I think it's one of the kind of the nice unknowns that if they are playing hot out the gate, maybe you can latch onto them from just kind of a betting standpoint. But heading in, it's not one of the teams that I feel a lot of compelled nature to really kind of get behind in the early goings there.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And this is another team that I'm not really compelled by either, because for Utah Tech, they were actually a very solid team in the WAC towards the back half of the year last year. They put it together. They did a much better job in terms of guarding the three-point arc. They were a top 35 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. I don't think that they return a single minute from last year. Rex Sutherland, he's going to be a guy that they look to. He was a relatively solid point guard over at Stone Hill. They're looking to a bunch of guys that actually come in from the state of Utah that were junior college guys, like Kyle Lemke and company, and that causes me to have a whole bunch of question marks with this team, because there's just absolutely nothing back from last year.
Yeah, and that's so tough, because Utah Tech, Dixie State, whatever you want to call them, last year, they were such a formidable team out in the WAC. I mean, truly, they had kind of that upside within the conference to go out and win the conference last year. And that's not where Utah Tech traditionally has kind of been as a program in terms of that positioning. Well, now it's kind of a complete overhaul. And although I really like and believe in the idea of, hey, maybe we can kind of build on last year's results. Maybe that kind of leads to them bringing in the right kind of guys on a more consistent basis than maybe they were in years prior. Again, this is one of those kind of hard reset teams, new landscape of a conference. And ultimately, I just don't feel one kind of conviction one way or the other. But yeah, I mean, if you are kind of one of those believers that program success builds on more sustained program success, maybe this is one of the teams that, again, in the early goings, if they show you something, you latch onto it and you believe it. But if we're kind of projecting the hierarchy of the conference from right here today, here in June, this isn't one of the teams that I'm projecting near the top.
Yep, I'm right there with you. As we've got Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And this was a team that fell on some very tough times last season. That would be Northern Arizona. Now, the good news for Northern Arizona is that one of their main guys, Ryan Abelman, great name because he is able man to come back, and he was giving the team 10.5 points per game. I have no idea what they're going to get outside of Ryan Abelman. It's a roster that loses quite a bit from last season. They're not going to have a lot of size. I think it gets better for Northern Arizona, but it was very clear that after Carson Tout was so good for them 2 years ago down low, they got absolutely destroyed on glass, and they need to find that next Carson Tout, in my opinion, to get back to prominence here in the Big Sky.
Yeah, and honestly, when you look at a coach like a Shane Burkhardt, there's a lot of guys that I think came into their current stop and their current position in college basketball at the most inopportune time. And he came in the season that got canceled, COVID. And I think ultimately there's a few different things. One, your season gets canceled. all that momentum that you're building up to that first year, it kind of hits, a stalemate. And then 2 or 3 years later, NIL is hitting an all-time high. The transfer portal is crazier than ever year over year after kind of that 3-year period. And now you're kind of stuck in between of you were hired to handle one landscape. That landscape has drastically changed. How are you handling it? And it's very clear that when you look at kind of the tenure of, Shane Burkar over at Northern Arizona, it's been all over the place, right? They've had years where they won 16 games, which is their first year. And since that point, they've only had one season that kind of eclipsed that 16 win mark. That was 2 years ago. And last year they went 10-22. So ultimately, I think when you're looking at Northern Arizona, again, you're looking at a program that's not in a good trajectory. And although it might be unfair, to kind of levy that against a guy like a Shane Burkar, the results kind of speak for themselves at this point, where the new landscape of college basketball, one way or another, affected this program. Again, I just don't think that they're going to kind of dig themselves out of the muck and emerge as a top 5 program in the new Big Sky.
Yep, I am right there with you. And I think that this program is one of the biggest, shall we say, lightning rods in the conference. That'd be Sacramento State, because Mike Bibby is their coach. We all know what he did with the Sacramento Kings. Year number 1 was a big giant turd because their main big man in Jeremiah Cherry went down with an injury. Mikey Williams was doing a good job at the guard spot. He was missing for like the last 10 or so games of the season, but they get Williams back. How about another guy with some NBA roots? Larry Hughes Jr. from CSUN averaged 17.5 points per game. He comes in. They're bringing in Marcus Wilson, who had 12.5 points, 4 assists per game over at UC Davis. The talent is here for them. I would say that they're the best roster in the conference if you look on paper. But here's the question. Can Mike Bibby, who is a very good player, actually coach?
Ultimately, that's the question, right? Because we've seen a guy like a Penny Hardaway, for example, at Memphis have a surplus of talent. And there's a lot of programs. I mean,
Captain of doing less with more.
Bingo. And I mean, you even go to like Georgetown and just some of these other programs that have
St. John's under Chris Mullen.
Bingo. You can go name by name of all these former talented players and herring a lot of talent, drawing in the talent because of who they were as a player, and then it just falls flat on their face. And the thing with Mike Bibby over at Sacramento State is they've had a lot of support from like Shaquille O'Neal as well. And so, I mean, they had like Snoop Dogg's son on this team a couple years ago. They had Mikey Williams. It kind of felt like this was a team that was the new trendy little kind of mid-major that could make some noise. Well, you kind of nailed it. They went 10-21 last season. So I think ultimately when you're looking at the trajectory of where they could go from the last year's squad that was so transfer heavy with a lot of big, notable, talented names, I don't know. I tend to think it can't get better from just a talent standpoint. And ultimately, we saw them fall flat on their face. This is, again, just not a team that I'm projecting near the top. And ultimately, because of the billing, I tend to want to fade this team as well.
Yep. I mean, man, if they can put it together, and if Mike Bibby isn't even a great coach, if he's a competent coach, my goodness, you're looking at something. That's a big question mark, though. And this is a man that is a very competent coach, but it feels like the game might be passing him by a little bit. I'm talking about Eastern Washington with Dan Monson. We all remember what he did over at Gonzaga. We all remember what he did over at Long Beach State. But, man, this team was 306th in the country in terms of points per possession on defense. They were really giving it up. Good news is they bring back Alton Hamilton. 13.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. Emmanuel Mardiquit, he's a guy that's able to give you a bit of something. Like the pickup of Jameel Miller, who he missed off last season, but 2 years ago was solid over at Kennesaw State. Want to get your thoughts here, because Eastern Washington is a solid offense. Dan Monson's teams just never, ever play defense, son. It's been a little bit of a rough transition for him going over to Eastern Washington.
Yeah, and I guess if there's any sort of silver lining to last year's Eastern Washington team, at the very, very start of conference play, I mean, I guess this maybe wasn't the very start, but it was kind of in the in-between of they had played enough conference games to have a solidified record. They started 5-17. It was a drastically terrible start. Even though it's an ugly record to finish, they finished at 13-18. So they did win, go 8-1 over their last 9 in the regular season before winning a game in the conference tournament and then losing to Idaho, who eventually went on to win the whole thing. So the silver lining there is that they finished better than they started. And again, that's kind of that positive sort of trend line that sometimes you can just kind of get on the back of. And Dan Monson, he's a great coach, but to your point, when you lose so many of your talented guys, when you underperform to start, and with this new landscape of college basketball being, hey, you got to start fresh. You're not going to get the benefit of a lot of continuity at a program like in Eastern Washington. Does that spell doom, for a guy like a Dan Monson who might be just kind of one of those, cultivating slow build type of styles? I tend to think it is. And so will Eastern Washington be somebody that you maybe want to back later in the season from a betting standpoint? Sure. But in the early goings, I probably don't want anything to do with Eastern Washington. And kind of same to that point, I don't think that they're going to be one of the teams that finish in the top 3 of this conference.
Yep, I'm in agreement with you there. And then this team is very interesting because 2 years ago, Idaho State really took a step up. They had Dylan Darling on that team. They were doing a great job with their rebounding. And last year, Idaho State's offense was much better, but boy, that defense that was pretty solid 2 years ago went straight down the toilet bowl for this team. 358th in points per possession allowed at home. They do bring back Lachlan Brewer, who was pretty solid for the team last year. They're going the Division II route. McCarthy Morris, he was able to average about 14.5 points per game. I want to get your thoughts here because with Idaho State, I really liked what I saw from them 2 years ago. Last year, it felt like they took a big, giant step back, and now they're banking on a lot of Division II guys like a Jeremiah Dorsey coming over from Concordia University to really lift this program up.
Yeah, and ultimately, when you look at Idaho State, and you've been watching college basketball for a long time, Greg, just like I have, the expectations for this program year to year are in the basement. There's not a lot of high upside. Oh, we remember the glory days of Idaho State basketball. There wasn't really any of that, and so ultimately, when you look at the last 4 years of Ryan Looney, a 5th place finish, a 4th place finish, a 7th place finish, and even last year when they finished in 9th in the conference, they won 13 games. That, by their standards, is over exceeding expectations. And so I tend to think Idaho State is probably just going to be who they are. They don't attract a lot of top end talent. He's a good enough coach to kind of elevate them past the floor. But ultimately, again, and I've been saying this like a broken record in the Big Sky with the teams we talked about so far, but just not another team that when you're looking at the long-term trajectory that you're feeling overly enthused about. And ultimately, I think this team is going to be another one where they win 13, 14, maybe 15 games. That's who they are. And by their standards, that's good enough.
Yep, that certainly is. And then with the other Idaho school, they made the NCAA tournament for the first time since I think dinosaurs roamed the earth. Now they do lose a lot of those key pieces from a season ago, so it is going to be a team that's in a little bit of rebuild. But Christian Gonzalez, who was supposed to be one of their main guards, he was limited to one game last season. That's something that they're able to feel good about. They bring in Ryan Lafferty, he comes over from Western Michigan after he had been a reserve on St. Thomas a few seasons ago as well. It feels like they've got some talented pieces. Now, no doubt about it, when you lose pretty much like 3 out of your top 5 scorers from a team that makes the NCAA tournament, that's an issue. But I feel like if Tristan Gonzalez can be back to where he was 2 seasons ago, maybe they're not back in the NCAA tournament, but I still think that this is a team that is really setting themselves up to be one of those teams that year in and year out is just rock solid out here in the Big Sky.
Yeah, and I think you kind of nailed it by bringing up, the last year's team that they had was such a perfect culmination of every single offseason, Greg. When we do these previews of conferences, we talk about those 2nd, 3rd, and 4th year coaches. And Alex Preble in year 3, imagine that. They make the NCAA tournament, they win 21 games, and they do it in a fashion that I think is repeatable in terms of they weren't out athleting anybody in terms of their athleticism, throwing down alley-oops. It wasn't that. They were going out there, they were playing fundamental basketball, and in this conference, you need to have that element with kind of the ability to do something else, whether it's elite level defense, hitting threes. That's what Idaho really kind of specialized in last year was, hey, they weren't scoring a ton in terms of the points department, but they were efficient from the field. And I think ultimately when you're looking at year 4 of Alex Preble, despite losing some of those top end guys, I tend to think this is going to be another formidable force in this conference, because with all the conference changes, with all the landscape changes, with all the coaches that have kind of been in and out of this league over the last 4 years, the door is open in the Big Sky to really kind of insert yourself as that new Eastern Washington, as that new Montana State that we constantly see at the top end of this league. And so I'm a big believer in Idaho making it happen again. And again, in these conferences with the transfer portal being what it is today, you don't buy into players, you don't buy into the names, you don't buy into the perceived talent of down transfers. you buy into the formidable coaches that year over year over year have seen kind of the betterment of their program. But Alex Preble, when you're talking about his first year, they went 11-21. The next year, 14-19. Year 3, the NCAA tournament, and they went 21-15. That's a trend line you can believe in, and that's a trend line that I personally fully believe in.
Oh, and I'm so glad that you were mentioning things the way that you were, because how about if we take a look at a mainstay in the Big Skies? We've got Rob Donaldson, who does such great work over at Underdog Fantasy, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Soups. That would be Montana, who's been 500 or better for 18 straight years. I know that for Travis Akir, it was a little bit of a down year last year, but 24 plus wins in 2 out of the last 3 years. As a matter of fact, has had 24 plus wins in, I believe, 4 out of the last 9 years for this program, and they're going to be losing money. Money Williams was the top scorer for this team, but they do maintain some of those guys that were pretty rock solid for them last season. Tyler Thompson, Keenan Aguino, these are 2 guys that are going to be back in the fold. Now for Montana, they need to clean up those turnovers. Man, that was rough, but I know it was a really good team in terms of being able to do the little things like being able to shoot it at the free throw line. And Jordan Clark is a really underrated Division II transfer coming over from Central Washington, and I fully expect Montana to be one of those teams back in the top 3 in this conference.
100%. They're a formidable force when you're talking about this Travis Akir and how he approaches the game. I've had the privilege now of watching 3 games up close, second and third row, and kind of hearing how he interacts with the refs, with the players, and with the fans. He is absolutely to a T, one of those guys who is a player's coach. He's always, shooting the bull, having a great time, joking with the refs, saying, hey, you called that on this end. Hey, just think about me next time when you're making the call on this side. I like a good balanced game. He's jarring with the fans when he's on the road. It's a fun guy. And I think when you're talking about a program like a Montana, or even just a conference in general, like the Big Sky, you can recruit if you have an element of a personality at the head coach spot that attracts people in. And that's exactly what Montana has at their disposal with Travis Akir. So even from, the standpoint of losing a guy like a Money Williams, who's a top end scorer in the league, the definitive best big in the league last season, I think ultimately they're going to be attracting talent because of who they have at the head coaching spot. That's why he's never going to go anywhere, no matter if they underperform or if they perform on average or if they overperform. And last year, they were 1 win away from the NCAA tournament. So I think they're pretty happy with the production that they're getting after making it the previous year as well. So I think ultimately Montana is going to be a main standpoint as long as he's heading the helm. And yeah, to that point, Idaho, Montana, it could be the exact same scenario playing out in next year's Big Sky Championship game.
I do want to throw in there this team because they're a team that year in and year out, it feels like they're very rock solid as well. They have yet to be able to break through. The last time they made the NCAA tournament was quite a few years ago, but it just feels like Northern Colorado is just always there. Now, for Northern Colorado, they're going to be losing a lot of that backcourt from last season, but what really stands out to me is that Northern Colorado has been a top 10 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage each of the last 2 years. Now, they give up a lot on the first shot, but you're not going to be able to get a second shot against Northern Colorado, and that in and itself is great. Now, they do lose quite a few of these guys like Brock Wiesney, Quinn Denker, guys like this, so Vincent Delano, who's one of the mainstays returning from the season ago, is going to need to step up, but it feels like this is Northern Colorado every single year because they've produced guys like Dalton Connect and company. They just always find these guys from the non-Division I ranks, and it feels like Steven Smiley just always gets this team to like 18 to 20 wins.
Yeah, no, Steve Smiley is one of those guys that is 100% going to be taking advantage of Northern Colorado being kind of a nice draw in a good state with a program that, to your point, has had the mantle of being able to turn out a guy like a Dalton Connect, along with a lot of other talented players that have gone on to get paid at a different university. And I think ultimately, again, we just talked about with Travis Akir, Steve Smiley has the same kind of thing of that edge of being able to latch onto your coach and have a recruiting advantage in a conference that traditionally doesn't have any advantages whatsoever. And so ultimately, when you look at also just Northern Colorado in general, and the fact that they have an elevation angle in terms of winning games at home at a demonstrative degree, yes, absolutely. The door is always open for them to handle business in conference play. And you saw them last year, take it to Colorado, for example, and on the road in that case as well. And so I think Northern Colorado, again, we're talking about the top 3. I do tend to think it is Montana. I do tend to think it's Idaho. And I think Northern Colorado is right there. If you could give me those three teams versus the field in the Big Sky next season to win the regular season and the conference tournament, there you go. I'm taking those odds if they're favorable.
Yep, I'm right there with you. And then when it comes to this program, they're one of the more notable programs out there in the Big Sky. I think that there might be some sneaky upside here for Weber State. They were pretty good on the defensive glass last season. They were actually okay in terms of guarding the three-point line as well. They're going to have to replace some of the talent from a season ago, and when Weber State was really at their peak a few seasons ago, they always ran through one guy. I mean, needless to say, when they had Damian Lillard there, that was absolutely amazing, but even when they had Damian Lillard there, this was a team that always struggled to be able to make the NCAA tournament. It's a team that had quite a bit of three-point shooting, but I like the fact that they bring in a guy in Brock Felder, who a few seasons ago was really good over at Southern Utah, a 2-block-per-game guy. DeQuan Cutler, he's going to be coming in to be able to help this team lend a little bit of size. Aaron Boom Boom Powell from Rice. I think that they bring in some good transfers here. The question mark is right now the guard play, because it feels like Weber State has always been a good guard-based team, not a lot down low. Feels like this team might be the opposite this year.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think there's upside every single time that you're banking on or kind of investing in the ground level of a coach that we know nothing really about as the head coach, right? And that's who Caleb Canales is, because, yes, we saw him as an associate head coach over at Troy, who brought in a ton of Euros in the last couple of years and has had two teams make the NCAA tournament. Like, that's legitimate experience to bring over to Weber State. On top of that, this is a guy with a substantive NBA background. I mean, he coached for 17 years with multiple different NBA teams as well as in the G League. And so when you're talking about, again, that kind of definitive edge, what makes your team different? What makes your head coach maybe a little bit different in comparison to the rest of the league, like the Big Sky? There you go. It's right on the head. NBA coaching experience. Not a lot of programs can kind of hang their hat on that. And so, again, maybe this isn't a team that in their early, kind of where we're sitting right now in June and projecting out the hierarchy of the conference, we could look like idiots, Greg. We could say, hey, Weber State's maybe in the middle, bottom, and then this ends up being a team that catapults into the top 4. I could totally see that happening ultimately because of the unknown upside. At the same time, you don't want to get too ahead of yourselves based on just that unknown. It's like the Family Guy meme, right? We could get a boat or we could get a box, and heck, it could be a boat. Who knows what could happen with Weber State next season, but if they start performing well in the early goings, I'm not going to be somebody that shies away from backing them.
You mentioned Family Guy. I'm going to mention The Simpsons. The Duff Man, Eric Duff, did not deliver the last 4 years over at Weber State. So we'll see if the changing of the guard helps out with that, as we do have our good friend Rob Donaldson trying to be right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And you mentioned it a little bit earlier in the podcast. Montana State has been one of those teams that has been a mainstay towards the top of the conference for oh so long. A little bit up and down the last few seasons. That's what's going to happen when you lose a coach like a Danny Sprinkle. They certainly have not bottomed out by any stretch of the imagination, and feels like one of the more balanced teams in the conference. Top 55 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage last year nationally. Top 105 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You bring back Christian King, who had 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. Calvin Holden is a guy that was a starter last season. Seth Amenrud, he's going to be coming back after he shot 40% from three, not bringing in a lot of flair via the transfer portal, but a 7-footer in London Prater should be a help out. And I think that for Montana State, will they be like maybe a top 2 team? I don't think so, but I think that this is going to be a very pesky team with a home court advantage out there in Bozeman that I think is going to trip up a lot of teams.
Yeah, and ultimately, I do think that Montana State has enough credibility within their conference based on the previous head coaching regimes where it's going to truly take them bottoming out in terms of the win-loss record or just competitive standings to really kind of lose that credibility within the conference, because there are a lot of players that when you grow up in the PCW or the Pacific Northwest, rather, PNW, or just even that you're familiar with maybe kind of the Big Sky landscape as a young aspiring college athlete, that's going to be the draw, right? That reputability, that ability to kind of latch on the prior successes. It's going to take a lot to kind of remove that notion from the brains of those kids. But to your point, when you talk about Matt Logie and what he's accomplished so far at Montana State, it's not inspiring comparatively to what came prior to him, because whether it was Sprinkle or whether it was, the previous regimes, Montana State was a little bit spoiled. That's kind of how it went. And now the football side's definitely there for Montana State. They're very competitive on that end. Has maybe some of that enthusiasm drifted to football and away from basketball? That could definitely be the case. But I tend to think until we, again, see this program really bottom out, not be competitive within the conference, then, that's kind of where I'm going to hop off the wagon of this team being a perpetual top 5 team in the Big Sky. But ultimately, in terms of the upside winning the conference, this wouldn't be a team that I would kind of peg as a team that I'd be overly enthusiastic to back to win the conference from here in June.
Yep, I think backing them to win the conference would be a little bit far-fetched. Do think that they're going to be very competitive, though, and certainly I think this team is going to be as well. Portland State was a unit on defense last year. How about a top 45 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 20 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage? Now, they are going to be losing some of those guys from a season ago, but they might have the biggest upside guy in this entire conference, Corin Johnson. Well, I remember him over at Washington a few seasons ago, averaging 11 points, a steal per contest, on 37% three-point shooting, glued to the bench over at Louisville and Mississippi State. They bring in Namia Pollard, who absolutely tore it up at Division II Western Washington last season. Like, I look at Jace Corbin, and he has yet to be able to break through, make the NCAA tournament, but I like what he's building over at Portland State, and it's built on good defense.
And ultimately, when you look at Portland State, and I think you nailed it with Jace Coburn, he was inheriting a program that was nothing back in 2021, 2022. And although it took that 3-year mark when they finally broke through that 500 win-loss ceiling, ever since that point, when they went 17-15 in 23-24, it was 19 wins. It was 20 wins, including winning their regular season conference in terms of the regular season for the Big Sky. And yeah, to your point, they did not get over the hump to actually win the conference tournament. It's difficult to win the conference tournament because you're playing against the top end teams to get there, and anything can happen, kind of that one-off go home type of setting. But I tend to think that when you are looking at a trend line to believe in, this is one where it's just going to take one NCAA tournament to lift Jace Coburn into a different coaching position, which I'm sure, like everybody, he's wanting to climb that ladder. He wants to make money. This is a guy that used to be a former high school coach, just going even dating back to 2013. So in a 13-year span, he has really elevated himself to be a prominent head coach in the Big Sky. You can't ignore that. And so ultimately, yeah, if you're talking about a team that's going to continue that prominence within the conference, continue that trend line, if you will, the Vikings are one of those teams that I'm latching onto as a definitive team that can go on and continue to make that headway, because I think that they've already been doing that year over year since 23.
Oh, yes, they are making headway. They are really elevating. And that's exactly what you do when you join this podcast, Rob. You're doing a tremendous job with your show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. You do great work over at Underdog Fantasy. This time you're doing a great job on the baseball front. Obviously doing amazing work in college sports and so much more. So we'll have to get people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, it's always a blast talking college hoops with you. I mean, we're talking about the Big Sky here in June, and I had an absolute blast. And, for those who want to follow my college basketball bets once that comes in the season, along with my Major League Baseball bets right now, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, man.
It is always great to be able to get Rob aboard. Such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this great sport of basketball, and every single time he joins me on such great insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VC Family Podcast. Coming next, it is that time of the podcast that gives you my projector of finish for the Big Sky.
When maintaining your daily wellness rituals is important to you, the change in routine during the summer can feel daunting. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just one packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and much more. So you'll be fueled and ready for wherever life or your summer adventures take you. No fillers, no nonsense. Just the good stuff your body craves. Plus, it actually tastes delicious. But you can try it for yourself, because the variety pack includes all 6 delicious fan favorites: chocolate, vanilla, chai, matcha, coconut acai, and strawberry. So instead of worrying about sticking to your daily ritual, simplify it with Kachava. Go to kachava.com and use code SHAKE for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code SHAKE.
And we're back back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always a pleasure to be joined by Rob Donaldson. He does such amazing work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. He, all throughout the year, takes a look at college basketball. Even though baseball is his main focus right now, does a great job in the offseason, getting set for these incredible games, these incredible conferences, and so much more. And every single time he joins me, find such great insight. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the live segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you my projector or finish for the Big Sky, and as per usual, anything that I might have missed from Saturday with regards to news and notes in college basketball, I will polish those up tomorrow because I want these conference previews to be as evergreen as possible. I want to give these conferences as much sparkle and shine because whether you're listening in June, July, August, September, October, I want to make sure that you've got good information. So I do always try to keep these very evergreen and try to keep these just specifically to the conference. So how about if we dive in with my projector or finish dead last? Southern Utah, man, just not a great defense to say the least. A lot of opponents to shoot 38% from three-point range. Now, they're a top 20 team in terms of fewest three-point attempts allowed on a per-possession basis, but they got mashed inside as well. They should get a little bit of help from Juwan Nichols, who comes in from Tennessee Tech, 6'8" big man that averaged for that team 11 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, but they're banking on someone like a Dylan Sanders, who's over at Division II Colorado Pueblo. He averaged about 10.5 points, 5 rebounds, and shot 36% from three to really elevate the team. Jordan Brown, he was a redshirt over at UNC Greensboro. They got a lot of non-Division I transfers, and for Southern Utah, this is just not a program that has taken off whatsoever. For Southern Utah, I've never really been a big Rob Jeter guy to start with. It just feels like this is a mismatch of different pieces that really don't mesh together. They turn the ball over way too much on offense, and I think that they are really going to struggle out here in the Big Sky. So, number 12 in my projector finish, Southern Utah. Number 11, we're going to stay out there in the state of Utah with Utah Tech, and I actually liked what I saw out of Utah Tech last season. 29th in the country, and opponent's three-point shooting percentage on defense, 30.7%, and they just lose everything from last season. Like Alex Dupree, he was a part-time starter over at Portland State last season, but he was only averaging about 3 points per contest. They're banking on Rex Sutherland, who he was over at New Hampshire a few seasons ago. Last year at Stonehill, he was able to give out about 3 assists, a little bit over a steal per game, 5 points per contest, and I think that Utah Tech is actually going to be a respectable defense. Utah Tech used to be a pretty good offense in terms of being able to bomb it from three-point range. It feels like they've changed your identity around over the last, we're going to call it about 24 or so months, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to score enough to be able to keep up in this conference, having just so many new pieces. They are pretty solid down low. Now they're going to be looking to Aaron Bliss to really be helping this team out. He was at the non-Division I ranks. Kyle Lemke, he's from within the state. I believe he was over at Snow Junior College. He was a guy that was able to be like their number 3, number 4 rebounder. They're banking on Owen Mackey, a freshman at 6'5", to be able to give them some versatility. And I just don't think it's going to be happening for this team. Boston Harker is back from a season ago, but he was limited to 5 games due to injury. We don't know how he's going to come back. So lots of question marks with these Utah schools, and with Utah Tech losing so much from what was a pretty solid team last year, I did have to put them in my projector finish at number 11. Number 10, I'm going with Northern Arizona. When Northern Arizona was really good a few seasons ago, they had Carson Tout down low, who was able to go out there and dominate. They just don't have size on the roster. Like, among players with any sort of Division I experience, they don't have a single guy that's above 6'5". Like, that is absolutely going to kill them, man. I like the fact that they bring back Ryan Abelman. Abelman, well, he was able, man, to be able to give you about 10.5 points per game, throw in their 4+ rebounds per game, so that's a really nice starting spot for Northern Arizona, but, I mean, how are they going to be able to defend down low? They got absolutely killed on the glass last season in a conference where there weren't a lot of teams that had a lot of second and third chances on the boards. Chris Coleman, he's back from a season ago as well. He was able to give the team right around about 8 points per game as a part-time starter, shot 36% from 3, and it was a team that shot about 36% from the outside. That was a top 50 mark in all of college basketball, but you lose so many of these guys like Zach Davidson, who was their top scorer. They had to play without him towards the second half of the season. Maybe that'll pay a little bit of dividends because it helped out Brandon Peterson, great name, guy that shot 41% from 3, get a little bit more playing time last season, 5 points, 2 assists per game, but there's just absolutely nothing down low for Northern Arizona. That's where all my question marks come in with this team, and that's a big reason why I've got them at number 10 in my projector finish. At number 9, I'm going to be going with Idaho State. it just feels like Coach Looney does a little bit more with less. They're going to be banking on Jeremiah Dorsey, who comes in from the Division II ranks, to really have himself a big season. And we've seen Idaho State do a good job in terms of being able to scour some talent from the non-D1 ranks. We saw what they were able to do with Dylan Darling a few seasons ago. He was able to take off, and for Dorsey, about 10 points, 3 assists per contest at the Division II ranks last season. Lachlan Brewer, he's your main guy that returns from a season ago. About 8.2 points, 3.5 rebounds per game last season, so I like him. He's pretty solid. And then from Division II Concordia, you've got McCary Morris, who was able to average about 14.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, 6'10". Malachi Johnson should be able to help this team out a little bit more down low. They were still a top 115 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They were just absolutely awful with their defense at home. And Idaho State has some of the most elevation of any team out there in all of college basketball. Like, I think it's Picarello or Poncerello or something like that. I forget the city name, but it's something that starts with a P out there in Idaho. It's got super duper elevation. I get there, we're 358th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis at home last season. So hard to really feel bullish there. For Idaho State, I think that's going to be a little bit of struggle with them. I don't necessarily love the roster, but that said, I do have some respect for Coach Looney, so I think that he keeps the team out of the cellar. Number 9 in my projector finish, I'm going to be going with Idaho State. At number 8, I'm going to be going with Weber State. Caleb Canales, he's a guy that has a lot of NBA experience. As a matter of fact, he spent a little bit of time with the Portland Trailblazers. Guess who was there when he was there? Oh, Damian Lillard, who he's the most famous alum of Weber State in history. So, yeah, we see where the connections are coming from there, and I certainly do think that Weber State is going to be looking to run it and gun it a little bit more, going with a little bit more of a professional style. And I like the fact that they bring in Dylan Warlick. I recognize that he missed last season due to injury, but 2 seasons ago over at St. Louis was shooting about 38.5% from 3. Ardarius Grayson is one of the few holdovers from a season ago, about 4 points per game. Augustine Ikwe, he comes over from New Mexico State. He had some size. He should be able to give you a bit of something down low. I have question marks at the guard position. Aaron Boom Boom Powell, he comes in from Rice after he just didn't get a lot of run there. I really think Brock Felder is going to be solid for this team. And I do think that Weber State is going to have some good low post play, because Felder, 2 seasons ago when he was over at Southern Utah, 5.8 points, 6 boards, 2 blocks per contest, really didn't get out there on the floor too much last season as a reserve over at Seattle, but DeQuan Cutler, he's able to give you a bit of something as well. The team was 344th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage last year. They're going to be much improved there, but again, what are you going to be able to get out of that backcourt? That's what really holds me back. I'm thinking that Weber State is truly going to ascend this year. So Weber State, number 8 in terms of my projector finish. And number 7, I'm going to be going with Idaho. They just lose so many pieces from that team that made the NCAA tournament a season ago. Now, good news is Christian Gonzalez, who was averaging double figures 2 seasons ago, he played in just 1 game last season due to injury. Getting him back, that is going to be massive, but I mean, you had your top scorer, Jackson Rasmussen, be essentially like the top recruit in the history of the program. He's now gone. You lose so many of these mix and match guys like an Isaiah Brickner and company. Brody Woodbury, I thought, was the guy that really brought it together. He was a nice transfer from Southeast Louisiana. You lose that, so they're going to be banking on Hudson Ward to do a nice job in terms of giving the team versatility. He was over at Western Michigan, shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range, 4.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. Ryan Lafferty, he was a reserve over at St. Thomas that should be able to give you a bit of something, but so many of the key pieces from last season has gone. You've got Case Wynot, who comes over from Washington State, average about 4 points per game, 6'7" combo player. Like, I think that Idaho is not going to bottom out or anything like that. I do think that this Idaho system is here to stay, but they are a team that year in and year out, they always do have such a difficulty in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. They were pretty solid down low, but I think that was a big byproduct of Woodbury being as good as he was. They were a top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage last year. I think that takes a little bit of a step back, especially with the defense that doesn't generate a lot of turnovers. So with Idaho, I put them at number 7 in terms of my projector finish. At number 6, I'm going with Eastern Washington. I do feel like the game has passed by Dan Monson a little bit, but I like the fact that they do retain some guys from a season ago, and we mentioned it with Rob Donaldson. This team was 11-7 in conference last season, and the fact that you're going to be bringing back someone like an Emmanuel Mandaquit, who was able to average about 5.5 points per game. Olin Hamilton was the top rebounder for this team. 13 points, right around about 5.5 boards, 2.2 assists per contest. At 6'8", is able to stretch a floor shot 36.5% from 3, albeit didn't bomb too much from 3, but he was able to give you some good 3-point shooting that's big, but you lose ahead of the sink in Isaiah Moses. He was the guy that really ran the show. It's a reason why this offense was so much more prolific prolific in conference play rather than non-conference play. And for this Eastern Washington team, top 85 team in terms of three-point shooting percentage last year, just completely lambasted down low. They were well outside the top 330 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, so they could be had there. Dan Monson's teams have never really been great with their defense. Upside here with bringing in Jameel Miller. He 2 seasons ago over at Kennesaw State, goals at 6'9", 7 points, 5 rebounds per game. I think that they're going to be improved down low, but again, how do you replace Moses from a season ago? They don't really bring in that guard, and that's what has me a little bit more lukewarm on Eastern Washington. So I've got them at number 6 in terms of my projector finish. At number 5, I'm going with Northern Colorado. I don't care that this team has lost like 4 out of their top 6 scores from a season ago. Under Coach Smiley, they just find a way to get 20 wins. And they're bringing back a guy that I like in Vincent Delano. Began his career over at Portland last season. He was able to give the team right in that neighborhood about 6 points per contest. He's able to give you a little bit of 3-point shooting. Egan Shields, he was about 5 boards, 6.5 points per game last season as well. You're bringing a Colorado wing and Andrew Crawford, who was just stuck to the bench last season. I do think that Manning Sharif, who had 11.5 points, 6 boards, 2.2 assists per contest, shot 40% from 3 at the non-Division I ranks at Trinidad State, is going to be able to come in right away. And this Northern Colorado team, one of the better mid-majors in terms of finding talent at the Division II ranks, in terms of finding these junior college guys. I just have all the faith in the world in Coach Smiley to keep things rolling. And this team, over the last 2 years, has been in the top 15 in both years in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Now, they need to do a better job in terms of not allowing teams to be able to make their first shot, and they do a nice job in terms of not allowing you to be able to get second and third chances. Caden Rayfield should be able to continue with that. He comes in from UT San Antonio, meet me for the Roadrunners, about 6.5 points, 4.8 rebounds per game. And then Shiante Tremble was able to shoot about 36% from 3 at Southern Miss. Northern Colorado, always a good 3-point shooting team. On the road specifically, they were a top 50 team with their 3-point shooting percentage. I think Northern Colorado stays towards the top half of the conference. I've got them number 5 in my projector finish. Number 4. Boy, this is interesting because Sacramento State, they have by far the most talent in this conference. If you looked at talent alone and all the coaching was the same, Sacramento State would win this conference 10 times out of 10. I mean, you've got Mikey Williams back, 17 points, 4.5 assists, like he's an NBA level guard. I mean, Larry Hughes Jr., last year over at CSUN, 17.5 points, steal and a half per contest, shot 39% from 3. Marcus Williams, 12.5 points, 4 assists. He was solid out there in the Big West. Also from the Big West, Osiris Grady, who was able to average 10 points per contest. Taj Glover is back from a season ago. But this team was atrocious on defense. 340th in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, 295th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're going to be looking to Revon Tudic, who he was over at Stone Hill last year, 7.8 rebounds per game, to be able to fortify things down low. I think they're going to be able to do so. But here's the question. Can Mike Bibby coach? We have no stinking idea whatsoever because they were absolutely floundered last season, albeit Jeremiah Cherry, their main big man, went down with an injury. I'm giving them the deficit of the doubt here. I think that the coaches in this conference with the other teams are going to be able to ascend even with a little bit less talent. So I've got Sacramento State here at number 4 in terms of my projector or finish. Numero Trace, we go with Montana State. Montana State is going to be returning the King, Christian King. He was able to average for the team 12.5 points, 4.5 boards, shot 36.5% from 3-point range, and this was a team that was 52nd overall in terms of 3-point shooting percentage at 36.1% last year. Top 110 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Jeremiah Davis, 9 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. That's solid. Calvin Holden, he was able to give you about 8.5 points per game. Now, he had his season cut short due to injury. We'll see how he comes back here, but I like the fact that they bring back a lot of these guys, and they should be a little bit stronger down low because you bring in a true 7-footer in London Prater. You really didn't see a lot of run over at Toledo, but he should be able to help out Darnez Slater. He was on the bench over at Colorado State last season. He should be able to give you a bit of something. And Seth Amonrud, he was able to shoot about 40% from 3-point range. Still do have some question marks with Montana State. They're a little bit more wobbly when they're away from home. Bozeman is a really good home court advantage. And it feels like they're a solid team, but not necessarily an amazing team. They don't give themselves a lot of second and third chances as well. So that has me a little bit questionable about them. But I still do think that Montana State, they've done a really good job over the last few seasons ever since Danny Sprinkle left. This new regime is doing a solid job. I still think that they stay towards the top of the conference. I've got Montana State at number 3 in terms of my projector or finish. Number 2, we're going to go with the other Montana school, Montana. They did a lot of little things well last season. Now, They're also outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They lose Money Williams, who is averaging about 20 points per game for this team, but they always do a great job in terms of finding non-Division I talent, and I think that they have found another gem here. Jordan Clark, how about 17.8 points, 3 boards, 4 assists on 39.5% three-point shooting at Central Washington, a very solid Division II school. You've got Jaylen Brown, who missed all of last season due to injury, career 36% three-point shooter when he was over at Pacific. This should be able to help out in terms of filling in for Money Williams. You can't replace them all with one guy, so you have to do it sort of by committee. I think that Clark and Brown are going to help out with that, and then you've got a pair of guys that returned from a season ago. Tyler Thompson, 8.5 points, 4 boards, 40% three-point shooter, and then Keenan Aguino, about 8.5 points, 4 boards. He was able to come in off the bench as a 6th man, and he was able to do a nice job there. Again, they're going to need to clean up the turnovers, but for Montana, they've got a track record of success under Travis Secure. They have been 18 straight seasons at or above 500. So I think that Montana finds their way back towards the top of the conference. Missoula is a really good home court advantage as well. So number 2 in terms of my projector finish, I'm going with Montana. And number 1 in my projector finish, I think the Vikings of Portland State finally break through. I like Jace Coburn as a coach. I love the way that this team played defense last year. 43rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. 20th in specifically defensive rebound percentage last year. And you bring in the Division II leader in rebounding from a season ago, Jaquay Randolph. This is a team that they always find diamonds in the rough. Randolph, how about this? 20.8 points and 15.4 rebounds per game on 36% three-point shooting. Now, I recognize it was at Southern Wesleyan, but my goodness, that's going to translate. Luke Kearney, he spent last year on Utah State's bench after he was averaging about 8.5 points per game over at Air Force. Nice find there. And then Corn Johnson might have the most raw talent of any newcomer in the conference. Keep in mind, a few seasons ago when he was at Washington, 2023-24 season, 11 points, 2.7 assists, 1.2 steals, shot 37.5% from three-point range, just couldn't get out there for Louisville or Mississippi State over the last 2 seasons. Nehemiah Pollard, 15.5 points, 5 boards. He was another Division II player that was solid. He was over at Western Washington. This Portland State team is built around good rebounding, and then you bring in Emil Skata. He was averaging about 37.5% three-point shooting at North Dakota State last season. I think Coach Colburn finally breaks through and gets Portland State to the NCAA tournament. Number 1 in my projector finish. We are going to be going with Portland State, and that'll wrap things up for the Big Sky Conference Preview Edition right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you do have 1 or 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, Larry CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Big thanks once again to our guy, Rob Donaldson, does such great work with the show/podcast. Rob's best. He joined me in the last segment. We've got 3 conference preview editions down. I've done 3 in the last 7 days, so we'll probably slow down here in the next week or 2, but I'm going to do a conference preview podcast for all 32 of these conferences here in the offseason. Look at the news and notes of college basketball. I've went over 2,300 straight days without a missed podcast, so you're going to be getting fresh podcasts every single day here in the offseason. Once we get back in season, we're going to get you guys picks and analysis on every single game, every single day, so appreciate you tuning in today. I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.
Keep your wellness routine going strong all summer. Kachava's new travel packs help you stick to your daily ritual even when you're on the go. Just 1 packet of Kachava's all-in-one nutrition shake provides complete nutrition wherever you are, with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, greens, adaptogens, and more. Simplify your daily ritual. Go to Kachava.com and use code SHAKE for 15% off. That's KACHAVA.com, code SHAKE.
The people who seem to get more done than everyone else, they're not working longer hours or running on more caffeine. They've just stopped wasting time on the stuff that doesn't move work forward. Switching apps, re-explaining context, hunting for files, those aren't small inefficiencies. They're hours wasted every week. Superhuman Go gives you those hours back. From the makers of Grammarly, Go is an AI chat that sits inside every tab and tool you already use. Always available and ready to help you with what you're working on. Ask it to draft something, summarize a long thread, pull up a file, or prep you for a meeting. Go handles it without you ever leaving the page you're on. This is what it looks like when AI actually fits into your work, instead of adding to it. It's like having a teammate whose only job is to help you be better at yours. Go keeps up so you can move forward. And with Go working with you, you can show off what you do best. See what Superhuman Go can do at superhuman.com. That's superhuman.com.
You already know Dad doesn't actually want another tire watch. So this Father's Day, gift him the tender, juicy taste of his favorite cut of steak from Omaha Steaks. Their high-quality steaks and proteins are perfect for summer grilling. Plus, you'll get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. Omaha Steaks is a family-owned company with over 100 years of expertise in the meat industry. That means premium meats for premium dads. Every steak is flash frozen and vacuum sealed at the moment of peak freshness, so every bite is as delicious as the day it was carved. Try the fan favorite Butcher's Cut Filet Mignon that has earned the coveted distinction of USDA certified very tender. Give the dads in your life something to savor. Visit omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com and get an extra $35 off with promo code AUDIO. Terms apply. See site for details.